Hello and welcome to The Diverse Bookshelf with me, Samia Aziz. On this show, I interview incredible authors doing a deep dive into important themes and issues while talking all things books. On today's episode, I'm talking to the wonderful Tasneem Abdur-Rashid. Tasneem Abdur-Rashid is a British Bengali writer born and raised in London. A mother of two, Tasneem has worked across media, PR and communications both in the UK and in the UAE. Today, Tasneem spends her days writing novels and her nights co-hosting the award-winning podcast Not Another Mom Pod. And in between, she's busy trying, and often failing, to be super mum, super wife and super chef. Having recently completed a master's in creative writing with distinction, Tasneem's debut rom-com, Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine, was published by Zaffre Books in July 2022. Thank you so much, Tasneem, for joining me today. I'm so excited that you're here.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show. I'm so excited to be here.
And I just want to begin with asking you to introduce your novel, Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine. What's it about?
Okay, so it's about a British Bengali woman called Zara, who's 29 years old. And her mum's basically issued her with an ultimatum to find a husband before her 30th birthday, or she's going to send her off to the motherland, which is Bangladesh, to find her a husband from there. So Zara's got a year to find a man, and she basically starts doing everything she can to try and find somebody to settle down with.
And I loved it. I found it relatable, hilarious, and just really like it was a twisty turny plot, which I also really loved. I think I couldn't predict at all what was going to happen. I think, often you pick up a rom-com, you can kind of see the arc developing and who's going to end up with who and what's going to happen. But I had absolutely no idea, and I kept on changing like who I was rooting for.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Who were you rooting for?
Well, initially I was rooting for Hamza because I was like, come on, Zara, do the sensible thing. This guy is everything. But then kind of, as the story progressed, there were all these like red flags kept on popping up, and he was quite controlling, and he'd like just turn up like when she was on the other side of the world.
What's really funny about that is like it's had such mixed opinions. So like some people are like, oh my God, like you and me are like, oh, he's, controlling, it's like toxic masculinity and all of that. And then other people are like, no, this is great. He's so romantic. He flew across the world to see her. So it's really divided opinions among our readers and Muslim women as well. So it's really interesting to hear all that. Yeah,
I can imagine. I guess your own sort of experiences and your own fears and stuff would feed into it so much. But I loved it. But then I think, like, because we saw Adam change as well, like when he was first introduced in the book, I kind of felt like, oh, this is like, he's a bit sleazy, he's a bit of a player, like such a ladies' man. But then you see this really like sensitive side to him and this really considerate side, and then obviously that develops, and then I'm like, oh, maybe she should end up with him. But it was great. So how did you come to write the book? What was your journey?
Oh God, it's been such a long journey. So basically this story this story has been kind of in progress in my mind, not on paper, ever since I reached that age, where our parents start looking for a partner for us. So in my case, it was like late teens. My mum parents started putting the word out there, trying to, look for a partner. And it was happening to my friends as well. And it's such a challenging and difficult time, putting yourself out there repeatedly, often to be just rejected based on a piece of paper or based on like really superficial things. And it can be fun as well. It can be really fun. There's like so many different parts to the process of finding someone. So when I was going through it, when I saw what my friends were going through, I just thought, you know what, this is a story that needs to be told. This was like 20 years ago. So I knew it needed to be told, but I didn't actually start telling it. So it was in my head. And then I just carried on with life. I had a career. I was doing all these other things, and I just kind of, took a back seat. And then so I lived abroad. I lived abroad for 7 years. I worked in like magazines and communications out in Dubai, got married. And then I started having kids. After my second child, I started revisiting the idea again. It was like, I think he was 4 or 5 months old, and he was a really clingy, really needy baby, and he was glued to me 24/7, and it was just relentless. Like, he would be awake all night, he'd wake up every hour all night, and then I had a toddler at the same time, and I was just in this pit where I just couldn't see a way out of it, a way out of just cooking and cleaning and parenting and laundry and vomit and poo and bottles and breastfeeding and the whole lot, right? It was killing me. Like, I thought, oh my God, like, yeah, I love my children, but it's so hard. And it's like, is this who I am now? Am I nothing but a mother? Like, being a mother is great, and it's such an honor in Islam, but there's more to me that, you know, I'm interested in other things as well. And I missed talking to people, and I missed writing, and I missed using my brains. And then one night it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, baby was feeding, and I just took out my laptop, I opened it, I reached over his body, and I started writing this story. I thought, you know what, I wanted to write this story ages ago, like now is the time. And it saved me in so many ways. Like, it gave me a purpose outside of motherhood. It made me enjoy life again. It gave me, you know, something to do apart from child rearing. So I wrote it really slowly. Like, obviously I was in no rush. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a book deal. I was just writing it for me originally. And then I started posting chapters of it online. So I had a blog, and I'd post chapters of it on the blog, and it received like really great feedback. And then about halfway through writing it, I thought, you know what, this is actually pretty good, you know, like I should try and do something with it. So I stopped posting chapters on the blog, and then I just focused on finishing the book off. And then I went through the traditional route of getting an agent and so on. Yeah. Sorry, that was a long answer, wasn't it?
No, that's a great answer. And thank you as well for being so honest about your struggles with motherhood, because, you know, so much of what we see in the media is kind of like one of two ways, right? But we see a lot of it being like glorified and, you know, painted as this absolutely perfect thing, and how if you are a mother, you should be fulfilled just because you're a mother. And actually, like, I think there does need to be a more nuanced conversation about how difficult it can be, and how isolating it can be, and how much, especially because you worked so much before you had a career, and you were traveling and living abroad. And how like dark and challenging that must have been.
You know what? It's such a shock. Like, nothing can prepare you for it. Even though I've had nieces and nephews, and I saw my sister doing it when I lived in Dubai. I lived with my sister, so I saw how she raised her kids. It doesn't hit you until it happens to you, and then everything you thought you knew just goes out the window. Like, everything you thought would be easy would come naturally, like breastfeeding, for example. I thought, how hard can it be? Like, stick a baby there and it feeds off you, and that's it. And it wasn't like that. It was, everything was so much harder. But you're right, it does. There needs to be more conversation. I mean, I would say I was traumatized from it. Like, people have asked me, oh, so are you going to write a book about like a mother and children? And I was like, I'm not ready for that. Like, I'm not ready to go down that rabbit hole just yet. Like, I'm still healing from it. Alhamdulillah, my kids are amazing. They're 8 and 6 now. They're at a beautiful age. And, you know, you love them to pieces, and you feel so conflicted because you love them so much. But sometimes it's so hard that you resent them as well. And then you're like, you feel guilty for resenting them. And then you think you're a bad mom and you're a bad Muslim, and you go through so many emotions. So yeah, there definitely needs to be a conversation about that, and more books and stuff written about that. Inshallah, I'll get there one day, but not yet.
And I think we did see a different type of conversation emerge with COVID, schools being closed, and a lot of the pressure that was put on families, but especially I think on mothers. So, you know, I welcome that. I mean, like, I don't have any children on my own at the moment, but like, and I think when you don't have kids, and if you want to have kids, you relate differently to conversations, and you view it differently as well. But still, yeah, definitely, I think we need to open up the floor for more nuanced and varied conversations, because I think community, race, religion, that all plays an impact in your experience of motherhood as well.
Definitely. There's so much that goes into it.
So you said that you had the idea of the book when you started to go on your own kind of like journey to find someone to get married, essentially, with your parents kind of beginning that for you. So how much of the book actually is inspired by your own life?
To be honest, it's not a lot of it. I think there are certain elements of it that relate to my life. So the whole setting, you know, Zara's from North London, Finsbury Park, that's where I grew up. where she lives, her house. That was my house growing up. And the ends, basically, you know, all the places she goes to. The nanny was based on my nanny, bits of the mom based on my mom, the dad or my dad. But I come from a massive family with 7 siblings. I've got 2 other sisters and I've got 4 brothers. And Zara obviously just has sisters. So that element of it was inspired by my sister-in-law. So my brother's wife, she comes from a family of just daughters, and she lives at they grew up with their nanny at home. So that was inspired by that. Some of the friends are based on my friends, and the experiences, the things that Zara goes through, I would say is like a mix of all the different things I've seen happening throughout the last 20 years of being aware of this, of the arranged marriage scene. So some of them eat like the whole PwC chocolate making event. Someone I knew went on one of those. The whole thing about, the dentist and the questionnaire, someone else had to experience that. So it's all I drew on basically experiences from my friends and family, and there's little elements of me in it, but I would say that the story as a whole isn't amazing. Yeah. But because of the similarities, just because of the fact that she's from Finsbury Park, everyone just thinks she's me. So even my relatives who know that's not me, they're like, we can't read it without thinking of you. We just hear your voice throughout that whole thing. And I'm like, Zara's nothing like me. Zara is so indecisive, and I'm not like that. I like to take control of situations.
Yeah.
So we're very different. Our characters are very different, and people know that, but they still think it's flipping me.
Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of South Asian women that will pick up the book, people will relate to different experiences. That happened in the book that Zara goes through, and even like her cousins go through it and stuff. I think depending on what you've done in life and where you live and all of that, I think there'll be different things that different people will feel like, oh my goodness, that exact thing happened to me.
Like I get so many messages from people who have read it, and they're like, you know what, this was spot on, that happened to me. I met this guy from the famous online app, and he was so toxic, he was so great online and in person, because we didn't click and I didn't really like him, and he just turned evil, and it was like exactly the same thing. So like there's so many different experiences. You're right, like people can relate to different parts of the journey and the process.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact actually that you decided to write a rom-com, because so much of the kind of pressures and expectations we put on Muslim authors, and I think it goes the same for Black authors and authors of color generally, is that we expect them, or not me personally, but we expect them to write about traumatic things, about their history, about colonialism and partition and racism and all of these things. And actually you wrote about love and finding someone to get married, and although the struggles of finding someone to get married was specific to a Muslim woman, she's searching for love. And I read this short story collection which was edited by Sarita Domingo called Who's Loving You? And in the introduction of that book, she talks about how most romantic novels or rom-coms feature white characters. And so especially when you're younger, you're reading it as a child of color, as a person of color, you're reading it and you're just thinking, okay, but who loves me? Because your experiences are so different to the white characters that you feel like, okay, but they're being loved, but who really is loving us? And actually what we see people like us going through horrible things in literature and life and history and whatever. And we don't see enough of love stories really. So, I thought that was so good. And we see Zara go through a whole host of emotions and, to try and find love. And what I loved was how sort of unapologetic the book was about the processes that happen within South Asian communities and the struggles that Muslim women face when finding someone to marry. And I just wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right what you just said. I mean, growing up, and I've said this before as well, that growing up, I was probably like you. I bet you read loads as a kid and as a teenager, right? And so did I. And in fact, I've read probably more than the average person, because we had no TV. Like my parents literally chucked our TV away when I was in year 6, and they're like, TV's rubbish, TV's a waste of time, and out with the TV. And then all I did was read books. despite the thousands, millions of books I went through, I could never find a character that looked like me, and you just can't relate to them in the same way you could relate to somebody who shares your experiences, especially as a teenager. And I think it's really tragic now looking back at our generation of young women growing up without any kind of no reference points, nothing on TV, nothing in literature. Every single reference point was a white person, and their experience was so different, and what they're looking for was different, and the challenges and everything they went through was completely different from we were experiencing. And we had, we were being othered inside our own houses when we were reading books. It wasn't just on the street. We were taking it back home as well, and we were alienated in our own homes through the books that we were reading and the shows that we were watching. And I find that really, really sad now. I'm so grateful that things are beginning to change. And hopefully that, we have such amazing, diverse YA authors now. So I'm hoping that, teenagers and young women now have got better, they can see themselves in books better. There's better representation out there. But I was really conscious of the fact that obviously I was writing as a Muslim, and I really wanted it to come across as unapologetic. So I'm so glad that it has, because I'm so tired of us apologizing for who we are. My whole life I've apologized for who I was, at school when I couldn't eat this, I was sorry, I can't, when I couldn't go to this party. I'd be invited to parties and there were going to be boys there, and I knew my parents were going to say no, but I was too embarrassed to say that I couldn't go and I wasn't allowed. And then I'd pretend that I'd come, and then I just wouldn't show up and be like, I'm so sorry, I was ill, all of that kind of thing. I was constantly apologizing for who I was. So I really wanted a book that was unapologetic, that it was so Bengali, kind of encapsulated the British Bengali experience. I made sure that the language was Sylheti. It's I don't think there's been published by a mainstream publisher anyway. I don't think there's ever been Sylheti in a book before. I don't know. I've not come across it. And so I wanted that to come across. I didn't want italics, for depicting the different languages, because why should it be italicized, and all of that. And I didn't even put translations on purpose. I thought, what, let you work it out through context. So I really wanted all of that to come across. So despite it being a rom-com and it being really funny, I wanted some serious themes to be threaded through it as well. Because I just feel like you're right. There's so much, whatever books, it's changing now, but when books about South Asians first started emerging, it was all about trauma, and it was about being victims, and arranged marriages were seen as something just so backwards and oppressive. And I wanted to show that actually it's not like that. Yeah, it's difficult, but so is finding anybody anyway, and anyhow is difficult. And this is just one way of finding somebody, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I love that in the book you didn't translate the Sylheti, because I felt like you didn't need to, right? Because we could figure it out. I'm not Bengali, so I didn't understand that exact words, but I figured it out based on the conversation that's happening, the context on the page, but also when you're generally invested, you can look it up. It's not, it's not going to take you very long. It's really easy to do. I thought it was so good. And I have seen that a lot more now in literature. And I love the fact that authors are doing this, and they're refusing to anglicized names, and they're refusing to make their life and their culture and their writing more palatable to the English speaking community, because it doesn't need to be like that. And actually we should come to you as we are. Why do we need to continue to change ourselves to fit into something that makes you more comfortable?
Exactly. I completely agree.
Yeah, and so obviously the book you explore the challenges of finding someone to get married, and I know a lot of people that are still kind of struggling to meet someone. I really wanted to have a conversation about what you think the struggle that so many women, especially Muslim women, face today when finding their life partner and the dating scene and all of that.
You know what? If I'm really, really honest, I just feel like most men out there just aren't good enough.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such a struggle, because it's so hard to find somebody out there who has all the same values that the women have. And I feel like women, Muslim women especially today, they're so amazing. They're cultured, they're experienced, they're educated, they're successful, you know, and they want to have all of that as well as be a mother and have children and, you know, be a wife and all of that kind of thing. And I think a lot of men, unfortunately, still aren't at the place where they're not threatened by that. And I see it a lot because I'm on groups where people share like biodatas when they're searching for partners, and the stuff that goes on those groups, you can see the things that they're asking for. A lot of them want women who are going to be happy to live at home with in-laws, whereas a lot of women don't want to do that. Of course, they want their own independence. They want their own home with their husband and to start a family and to start a life together away from the in-laws. Yeah, have their own space, and that's a right for them Islamically. That's a right. But more and more, and a part of it is because of the cost of living, but that's part of it, because you could rent if you wanted to. If two people are working, there's no reason why you can't rent a place. You know, obviously they still want to live at home with their parents, so that's one of the issues. So I just feel like men need to just step up, and men need to just get with the times a little bit and stop expecting that traditional docile wife who's just going to stay at home and raise kids and look after their mum and dad, because women aren't prepared to do that anymore. Maybe once upon a time they did it because they had no choice, but they do have a choice now. Women have a choice now. Because most of the women I speak to, they're like, look, my life is amazing. I've got such a good job. I live with my mum and dad. I'm chilling. I'm happy. What is a man going to bring to this situation? How is he going to make my life better? And if he's not going to make my life better, then why would I do it? You know? Absolutely.
I think part of the issue is that women doing such amazing things these days, and like they're just, even if they're not like working or whatever, they're still developed intellectually and creatively, and they're just so brilliant that they don't want to settle. They're not going to accept something that's subpar. And I just think men are a bit slower in that regard and still need to catch up.
100%. I think they might be getting there a little bit. I have hope. Like sometimes I have so much hope because you see a few here and there and they're feminists, you know, and you're like, oh, this is amazing. But then when you dig deeper, most of them still have a long way to go. But I feel like our generation, I feel like the generation where we're the parents and we're raising boys to be, you know, different. We're raising them to have empathy and to be sensitive and to be vulnerable and to show respect and appreciation and all of that. I'm hoping by that point, I mean, if otherwise we failed, haven't we? If we don't raise children like that, then we've completely failed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about breaking cycles now, isn't it? Instead of perpetuating them. And I'm hopeful. I'm massively hopeful for what happens next. So, you know, we've talked a lot about the fact that this is a rom-com, but it doesn't have a happy rom-com ending. Now let's unpack that a little bit. And I actually love the fact that it didn't have a happy rom-com ending. It had a major twist. Honestly, I nearly fell off my chair. Like I was so shocked by the twist. I couldn't believe it happened. And I just felt, because I imagined like how gut-wrenching that must have been for Zara, like, because I have done things like that in life, like sent someone the wrong text message or said the wrong thing to the wrong person. But
I've done it as well.
For it to happen at such a pivotal point in her life, I felt so devastated for her. But yeah,
do you think she should have told Hamza from before about what happened and been honest about it? Do you think that would have changed it or not?
I mean, I'm not sure. If I was in her shoes, I probably wouldn't have, because she was still not understanding it at all.
Yeah.
And I think she had come to terms with kind of letting it lie. But I don't know. It's a hard one. But I did feel like with Hamza, she was kind of settling, and she was so almost desperate because she felt so pressured by everything going on with her family and her cousin getting married, all this kind of stuff, that she agreed to marry him when she wasn't actually sure that was what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest thing. That was actually more important about whether or not she told him what happened with Adam, is that she wasn't, I don't think her heart was in it fully.
Yeah.
And we see that, I think a lot of that happens a lot, and not just with Muslim women. I think it happens with women in general, because you want kind of, you're just like, I'm so done. I just want to settle down. I just want to get married and like move ahead. And I want to, you know, like I'm tired of this. I'm fed up. And you you accept something that doesn't
It
feel
happens all the time. Yeah,
it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel, you're just like, this isn't exactly what I want, but I feel like I don't have a choice in many ways. Yeah, and I think that was the biggest issue, really, wasn't wasn't even that she didn't tell him, but yeah, so you decided not to give it a happy ending, in the sense that she didn't get married by the end of the book. I mean, major spoiler, but she didn't get married by the end of the book. And it's not clear at all kind of what happens, right? Like, does she get with either of them? Does she get back with Hamza? Do her and Adam have a flourishing love story? And I mean, I like that. I like that messy ending, because the whole thing was a mess, right? Like, it was just, everything was messy. So I felt like if you had tied it up neatly,
right?
like if you had tied it up neatly, I think it would have felt quite forced. But you didn't. But what was that thinking and that process like for you?
You know what? You know how you were going through all these emotions and twists and turns? I was going through the same. So when I write, I never know what the ending is going to be like. So I have like a vague idea of what I want to happen throughout the story, but the actual ending, I never decide it until I get there. Because I just feel like things happen, right, throughout the course of writing it, and the characters develop and change. And so all these things kept happening as I was writing the story. And up until I wrote the end, I wasn't sure how I wanted it to end. But when I got to that point, I just felt like this feels right. And like you said, it's messy. And I just thought, you know what? Life is so messy, and she is messy, and the whole thing is messy, like you said. And it just didn't feel authentic to tie it all up neatly just for the sake of ticking that box. But then I knew that it was taking a risk. I knew it was taking a massive risk, especially when you don't really get what you see on the tin, right?
Yeah.
It's like opening a box of chocolates and then there's like one missing. Your favorite one is missing. And I knew that I was taking a massive risk, and I knew readers would be divided. But then I was willing to take that risk. I just thought, you know what, if I write a neat ending that doesn't feel authentic to the story, it doesn't feel authentic to the characters, and it just felt like the right thing to do was to leave it open in the way that I did.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think as well, like, readers will develop their own like hopes for Zara and for Hamza and for Adam, and will imagine that different things happen, which is so nice, I think, to be able, as a reader, to be able to do that. But speaking of characters, I want to touch on Zara's mum.
Yeah.
Because I love her. Like, I just think she's such a great character. So, it seems, in many ways, well-intentioned, but also a bit out of touch, maybe. You know, obviously is dealing with her own cultural expectations, her own experiences, her own baggage. What was writing Zara's mum like for you?
I loved writing Zara's mum. She is one of my favorites. She is probably the mum and the nanny. They're my favorite characters in the book, I think. And I loved writing her because I thought like she's complex as well. Like she has a good heart and she loves her daughter so much, but she just does everything and she says all the wrong things.
Yeah.
But I feel like the things that she says are all wrong. It's because of the culture and the community and the society that she was raised in and that she grew up in. You know, she doesn't really get out much. You know, she's a housewife. She's been at home. She got married young. She's been, you know, making a family for the last however many years. And this is what she sees of life. She watches Pakistani dramas, you know, and so she thinks that, you know, to be married, you have to be slim and fair and beautiful. And, you know, you have to do these things and you have to tick these boxes, and otherwise no one's going to want you. If you're seen gallivanting around London with next man, no one's going to want to marry you. And you know, so she wants the best for her daughters, but she's also unapologetic. She just says it how it is, really.
Yeah.
And how a lot of women from her generation think but might not necessarily say it out loud.
Yeah,
but absolutely. I feel like a lot of people in that generation think the same.
Yeah, they do. And I think it was because it was just so true to how so many women in that generation are. Like, I found it so relatable and actually quite comforting, because I could understand where those ideas and those thoughts were coming from. And I think that's what's really important, is to understand the context and not just take this phrase that she said or this thing that she did and you know, paint her to be a villain because of it, because that's not what's going on, right? Like, it's actually very complex and something that deserves a bit more of a nuanced representation and conversation.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's been mixed feedbacks. Like you, some people are like, oh, I love the mom, she's this and that. And some people are like, oh my God, I hate the mom, she's so horrible, she's so mean, you know? But I think, like you said, it's about the context. And I think when you're from this culture, you get it because you've seen it, you might have experienced it, and you get the context, so you understand it. And it depends, I think, on what generation you're from as well. If you're much younger, you probably got a mom who's from a much, you know, who's younger than Zara's mom. She's not in her 50s, you know, she's in her early 40s perhaps. And so she'd have a very different experience. It depends whether you're first generation, second generation. Like, there's so much that goes into it.
Definitely.
I mean, just my parents, just seeing how, you know, how much they've evolved from the elder sibling to the younger sibling. You know, they've evolved as well throughout that. So, and Zara is the eldest, so it's the first time they're going through this. When it comes to Amina, I'm sure it'll be very different. Amina's going to do what the hell she wants to do. She's not going to listen to anyone. She probably won't even get married. I don't think she's even going to look, you know. But yeah, I think they change as well. The parents, yeah.
And so you're a Muslim woman, a visibly Muslim woman, like you wear hijab and you're very unapologetic about who you are, where you're from.
I really am.
Yeah,
but
I love
you know
it.
What? It's taken me so long to get here. I mean, I'm nearly 40 now. I'm 40 next birthday. And I would say throughout my whole teenage years, so I grew up in North London, right? Back in those days, there weren't, and where I lived, there were no Bengalis. There were no very few Muslims. The only Muslims were Turkish Muslims, and they were very secular. So they weren't visibly Muslim, right? And there was a black community where we lived growing up, but there weren't any Asians or Muslims. So I started wearing a headscarf when I was really young. I was like 10 years old, 10 years old. I was copying my older sister who started wearing it. I went to school, primary school, in my little headscarf. Jamie pulled it off immediately. The one other Muslim, a Moroccan boy who I thought would be really kind towards me, actually wasn't. He said I look like his grandmother, you know, all of that. So I was just so when I was young, I went through a lot of stuff like that. As a teenager, I met Asian friends. It was the first time I had Asian friends, but they were all Hindu. But it was the first time I had Asian friends, and I gravitated towards them because of the color of their skin. We were all brown, so we still shared a lot of similar things, even though we weren't, you know, they weren't Muslim, and we shared a lot. And then, you know, growing up in London as a Bengali as well, you also face discrimination from other Asians, like Bengalis. We're seen as the lowest of the three. You know, the Indians look down at you and the Pakistanis look down at you. And growing up, when people would say to me, because I'm really tall, right? I'm like 5'8", which is unheard of for Bengali women. Bengalis are notoriously very petite. My family is an exception. We're all really tall in my family. Anyway, so when they'd see me, they'd be like, oh, you know, you don't look Bengali. I would take it as a compliment, and I'd be so happy that somebody thought I wasn't Bengali, because I thought Bengali meant, you know, like skinny, short, ugly, whatever, village, you know, villagey, all of that. All these connotations were associated with being Bengali. So I was embarrassed about being Bengali. And I used to pretend to be other things. Like, people would ask me where you're from, I'd make up this, make up that. Like, I was always telling stories one way or another, right? And I'll just make it. And I was just, it's only when I moved to Dubai, which is really weird. When I moved to Dubai, I became, and obviously over there, if you're South Asian, you're looked down upon. But obviously we're British as well. So then you're like put on the pedestal, but then we're brown. And so it was very conflicting, right? And I'll tell people be like, oh, where are you from? So I'll be like, England. And they'll be like, no, but where are you really from? You know, where's your dad from? So the Emiratis would be like, where's your father from? And then I'll say Bangladesh, and they'd be really shocked because they hadn't seen Bengalis who were tall and whatever, could speak English, you know, with an English accent. And then it came to a point where I got sick of saying England. So when people say, where are you from? I just say like Bangladesh from the beginning. I thought, just cut all that out. Just say Bangladesh and let them be even more confused about my accent. It's fine. So I started playing up to that even more. So like, I'll just tell everybody, like, you know, I stopped feeling so ashamed. I started feeling proud of the fact that I was Bengali. And I was really owning that. I was really owning my Londonness as well from living abroad, because I missed it so much. I missed London, I missed everything. And I just really started playing up to all of that. And then I just got more and more comfortable in my own skin. And now I'm at a point where I'll go out in a sari and I'll own it, you know? And I'll be happy to. I love wearing saris now. I love the food. I like, you know, I've even been listening to Coke Studio Bangla. Like, that's really cool.
Yeah,
It's
that's
pretty
cool.
cool. Like back in the day, I would never listen to Bengali music, you know.
Mm,
So it's taken a long time, alhamdulillah, but I'm at a place now where I'm proud of my heritage and my culture.
mm,
And yeah, and I'm unapologetically a Muslim as well. I'm a hijabi and I'm so proud of that.
mm,
You know, I still feel sad when people stop identifying with it and they don't want to wear it. It still hurts me and I don't know why it does. But I just feel like I lost another sister in solidarity of being visibly Muslim and the challenges you go through being visibly
mm.
Muslim. You know, there's so
Yeah.
much that you go through, and I get it. It's really, really hard, and it's not always for everyone.
Mm,
But alhamdulillah, I'm really happy with where I am
mm.
now.
That's so great, honestly. Like, I loved hearing you talk about that just now. And I think, like, I can relate to so much of that. Like, when I was at school, when I was like at primary school, I was really self-conscious and I felt very conflicted about my South Asian and Muslim identity. But now I feel so comfortable in it. And I think I lived in Pakistan for 2 years, and maybe that's part of the reason as well, is that I have come to embrace it in ways that I couldn't do when I was younger. It's not easy all of the time, but I honestly feel so at peace with these different parts of my identity, and I feel
Yeah,
unapologetically Muslim, Asian, and I'm happy to be seen speaking Urdu in public, or like, I wear sharakmis often and kurtas and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, but it
alhamdulillah, I'm so
as well
happy.
has been a journey, and I really hope that the next generation have a more secure relationship with their heritage and
Yeah,
don't feel as torn as we did. But I think they'll face different challenges as
yeah,
well.
I think so.
Every generation has its own struggles. But on being a Muslim woman, you are also a Muslim author. And I
Yeah,
think there's a lot of pressure on Muslim representation and Muslim authors to represent Muslims in a certain way, and it goes both ways. I think there's a publishing industry and there's a community that expect us to kind of show the ugly side of everything and to talk about how Islam is not a liberating religion, and actually, like, the Western world is better. So there's that side, and
yeah,
obviously that includes really harmful stereotypes. And then the other side is being held to like a really high, what's the word? A really high
moral.
expectations. Yeah, and like a moral standing about representing Muslims. Like, how
Yeah.
did you navigate that? What was that like for you?
For me, I actually found it really difficult, to be
Mm,
honest. Because like I'm visibly Muslim. I'm so proud of being a Muslim, and I really wanted to, I really wanted other Muslims to be happy with what I had written, and
mm,
I didn't want to write anything that would offend anybody. So
mm,
I felt like it's already been done to death so many times. I don't want to be another person doing that.
yeah.
Even if there are issues in our culture and in our religion, I was a bit wary about how I wrote about it because
Mm,
I didn't want to feed into that stereotype.
mm,
So I was really careful to keep things balanced.
mm,
So I was really aware of it, and I was scared as well. I was scared of what the feedback would be like after, and that's why I intentionally didn't make Zara a hijabi character. A
mm,
friend of mine asked me recently, she's like, you know what? She goes, I loved your book, and she's also another fellow North London hijabi, but she was like, I loved it, but I really wanted Zara to be a hijabi. I wanted that representation. I wanted to see a hijabi character.
mm,
Like, you know what? I said, I'm not ready. I just wasn't ready for that.
mm,
I wasn't ready to face the extra scrutiny, and wasn't ready for Zara to face the extra scrutiny, because so there's a kiss scene, for example. Imagine I say hijabi kissing somebody in a restaurant. What the hell's going to happen then? You
yeah,
know? And
exactly.
I'm sure things like that happen, but I don't know if it's if it happening is the majority or not. Who knows what goes on
Mm,
behind closed doors? But I
exactly.
didn't want to be the one to put that in writing and make it look like the standard for hijabis when it might not be the standard at all.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I didn't want people to be like, well, she's Muslim and she's representing Islam, the character. Why is she doing things that are un-Islamic?
Mm,
So, and people do things that are un-Islamic all the time in real life. But I
mm,
didn't want to be the one to immortalize that story on paper and have that become the standard now,
mm,
because there's just so few of us there already. I don't think we're at a place where we can write like that yet, because it's just, we need so much more good to be there first. We need it to be balanced. We've been, you know, victims and oppressed, and our men have been misogynists and abusers and all of that in literature and in media for so long. I feel like it needs to be more positive to balance it out, even if it's not as authentic. That's how I felt at that point. Do I still feel like that? A little bit. Like I would still be wary if I had a character who wore hijab. I would want her to act accordingly. I would want her to respect the hijab. I would want her to act modestly and to give it that, you know, give it that respect. So the story would have to be in line with that. I have no interest in creating characters that are, you know, look religious and act irreligiously. Even if that happens, that's not my experience, and I just don't want to write that. So yeah, I am very, very wary of it. At the same time, I know that non-Muslims are reading my book. I want non-Muslims to read my book. I want them to, you know, see what things are like in our culture and our communities and enjoy the story. Like, it's a story that transcends culture. Looking for love, it's universal. But I had to be mindful of that as well when I was writing. So there are a little bit, like, there's a little paragraph about Ramadan, and I remember somebody was like, oh, why is she explaining what Ramadan is, like, you know. I was like, well, maybe not everyone does know, like, I think people are reading it, so I wanted like a few sentences about that, and then I'm like, well, so what, it's my book.
It is your book.
I'll write that in if I want to. Write your own book, you
know. I think I agree with everything that you just said, and I do think you're right. If Zara did wear a headscarf, you would have been inclined for her to make different decisions, and I think a lot of readers would have had expectations of her to do certain things or not do certain things, and it would have changed your story. And I do feel a bit sad about that, really, because there are 1.6 billion Muslims, and no two people are the same. And people have different journeys, and they do different things, and they feel okay about some things or not okay about other things. But I think for me, the issue isn't so much like what we present or what we say Muslims do or this Muslim did. It's what we then suggest or imply about the religion. And I think it can be done well. Like, I feel like even if Zara, in your book, for example, even if Zara did wear a headscarf and you kept it the same, and there was that kiss scene and she got on the back of a motorbike, the way that the book was written and the way that the story unfolded, I don't feel like we would make massive judgments about Islam as a religion. Just because of the focus was on love, right? And she was still so dedicated to her family and to her identity, and she never once kind of, you know, if for example, if she was sure in her identity is in wearing the hijab, and she didn't have this like, oh, I want to take the hijab off and all of that kind of stuff, if that wasn't there, I feel like maybe it would still have been okay. But what we see a lot increasingly, which really, really upsets me actually, is we have Muslim characters that do things that are probably considered not very good Muslim-y. But then the conclusions that they draw is that a life without Islam is better, or that Islam is backwards and therefore we are rebelling. We don't want to wear hijab because it's too oppressive. Those things, because those feed into those same negative stereotypes, and it creates a really, really bad impression, not just of Muslims, but of the religion, which I feel like is the thing that we really need to move away from.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's, you know, like, there are so many different experiences and people do so many different things, and it's fine, I think, to show that variety and to have, because there are going to be people that relate to those things and want to see their experiences reflected in some way because it can help you. But I think there needs to be increased sensitivity on what that implies more broadly about Islam, especially, you know, in this day and age where like so much about the religion is politicized and used against us, and has very real consequences for lots of people around the world. But so in the book as well, we talk, Zara is 29 and she's approaching her 30th birthday. I want to talk a little bit about that 30 milestone.
Yeah.
Just why did you decide to include that? What was your own experience
Yeah.
of that, or people that you've met
Yeah.
turning
So I
30?
feel like from what I've seen in my culture, my circle of people, there seems to be a stigma about turning 30 and being unmarried. And there's like this perception of once you've reached 30, you're over the hill, like it's just going to dwindle now.
Yeah.
All your proposals, they're going to get less and less. You're getting older and older. Your eggs are dying out, expiring one by one. And there seems to be a real issue about that turning 30, the age, even though it's whether you're 29 or 31, it's really very little. But you know what? Even in pregnancies, when you're pregnant and you're like in going for your maternity stuff, I think 35 is considered an what's it called?
Geriatric.
Geriatric. Yeah, it's a geriatric pregnancy. Like when you think of geriatric, you think of like 70-year-olds.
Yeah.
I was
Like
a 35-year-old. Yeah, how are you geriatric, you know? So I think, yeah, there is definitely this perception. I don't know, what do you think? Have you seen that as well? Like once you're 30, that is it.
Massively, yeah, massively. 30 seems like the cutoff
Like
for,
doomsday. Yeah.
yeah. And I think even for getting pregnant as well, 30 feels like a massive kind of, if you haven't had your first child by 30, you feel like, oh my God, I'm gonna wake up on my 30th birthday and like all my eggs are gonna have disappeared.
Yeah.
And like there's just so much pressure that's not fair, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's the sad thing is men obviously don't have to worry about all of that
Exactly.
at all. In fact, if they're older, it's better because they're more stable, they've got a better job probably, they're more financially secure, they've got more to offer, blah blah. And whereas when you're a woman, so I wasn't married before, I was like 27 when I got married, so I didn't have to deal with that. But I didn't have my first child until I was, I think, 31. I was 31 when I had Kareem. And yeah, and everyone, it was hard. And I did, you know what, I did have like gestational diabetes and all of that because then they were like, yeah, well, you're over 30, so you're more predisposed to having these things. If you're Asian and you're over 30, then you're more likely to get it. And the younger you are, the easier the pregnancy is. And you hear all of that over and over again. So there's still this definitely an obsession with age. But so with Zara's mom, she's no different. She's like, this girl's 29, she's going to turn 30, she's going to be stuck with me forever if she doesn't get married now. But obviously she turns 30 and the world doesn't come crashing down around her, and it's just another day, and she's fine, she's absolutely fine. And I think more and more women are getting married later. But from what I've seen on the different marriage groups and things I'm on, it's harder because especially if the guys are younger and they're looking to get married. So anyone 30 and younger is looking for someone under 30. And the guys that are over 30, some of them they're already divorced or with children or whatever. So the single women over 30 might not want to take on that kind of responsibility. So it's a bit of a mess, really.
Yeah, and I think even a lot of the guys over 30 still want a wife that's 5-6 years younger than them.
Yeah, that's true. And I remember I said it once. There was a woman, she posted like the biodata of somebody in her family, and he said, I think he was like 39 or something. And she said, they're looking for someone between the ages of 23 and 33 or something like that.
Wow.
And he was 39. And then I actually commented and I was like, it astounds me how you guys think a 23-year-old would be more compatible with this 39-year-old than a 35-year-old would be.
Gosh, yeah.
And I was just like horrified. But it happens because obviously they want someone fertile. They want somebody who has an experienced life, who they can mold and groom into doing whatever they want, basically. And they say it themselves. The older women they think women become complicated because why? They know who they are and they know what they want,
exactly.
And that's seen as a bad thing. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
There is a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work. So what was your favorite part about writing the book? Like, what did you enjoy the most?
I think, there's just so much, like writing it and publishing it, or just writing it?
Writing and publishing.
I think what I've enjoyed the most is getting people's feedback. I think there's nothing more nothing feels as good as when somebody messages you and tells you that they loved it or they could relate to it, or so many women have messaged me saying that this is the first book they've read since like GCSEs. I've had so many people message
Aw,
that, and I was like, oh my God, can you imagine? Like, they
yeah.
haven't touched a book in 20 years, and there's something about my book made them want to go and get it and read it. And it's the first book, and now they want to carry on reading, and they loved it,
Mm.
and they really enjoyed reading, and they're back into reading now. And I think that is definitely hands down the best feeling. So I've really been enjoying that. Obviously I enjoyed writing it because there was no pressure, and I wasn't writing it for anyone, and I was just taking my time. I really enjoyed creating the stories, and I love dialogue. Like, I just loved writing dialogue, and I really enjoyed that. But the thing is, with my first draft, I wrote way too much. It was like 40,000 words more than it was supposed to be.
Whoa,
I
that's a
hated that
lot.
part. I hated the editing. I absolutely loathed the editing process.
Oh,
It was
did you?
so
Yeah.
hard.
Oh, I'm so fascinated. So, what did you take out? 40,000
Loads,
words.
loads, loads. Because basically, it was so different. The first draft was so different because it was so flipping long, right? So I had like I had more guys that she met.
Ah, okay, okay.
So I
Makes
had
sense.
loads
Yeah.
more guys that she met. So there was like a character who she met at home, like through the traditional way, and did the whole home
Mm.
meeting thing. She went to like one of those revert mosque events. She
Oh,
went to one
wow.
of those. So there was like loads of other ways she tried finding somebody, basically. But then that made the book really, really long. And
Yeah.
oh no, it's already quite a hefty book, isn't it? It's like 400 pages. So can you imagine? So when they were like, look, you've got to cut down like 40,000 words, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do it? And I literally just went back and started killing characters. I had to kill whole characters because I couldn't do it line by line. Like, it would,
Yeah. Yeah. 40, that's too
you
much.
can't.
40,000
Yeah. So
words.
I
Yeah.
killed off whole characters. I basically shaved off all the fat, or trimmed all the fat off, all the extra guys that she met that
Yeah.
weren't progressing the story, and it was just funny. Yeah,
Mm.
I had to cut out all of that.
Oh.
And there was a whole different plot. There was a whole plot with Mr. Piccadilly line, like a whole thing happened with him.
Yeah. So Mr. Piccadilly, like that just finished like really
Yeah, that just
abruptly.
finished. So that was supposed to be a whole thing, yeah. So I took out the whole chapter originally, and
Yeah.
when I was cutting words down, and when I got to the end and I still had some words, I was like, can I please put on this chapter? There's this really hot guy on a tube, like, can I just have it? And they were like, go on then. And I was like, it's really funny, it has to be there. And then they were like, yeah, cool, that's fine. You've got some words, so it's all right. So then I put it back in. But there was a whole storyline with him. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I think
because I mean, when I started reading it, I thought that he was going to be one of the main contenders
yeah,
in
no, he's
in
just
her love story, but we didn't see
unfortunately
that develop.
he was a main contender originally, but what happened during editing, they were just like, look, there's too many, like, obviously we
Mm,
need to keep it focused,
mm.
can't have like 50 different guys.
Yeah. Do you
But
think
I
you could?
wanted that though, because I wanted to show how it is,
Yeah.
because that's what can happen sometimes. There's just so many, but they were like, look, if that's for another book, keep those things for another book for
Y-
one day. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna ask, like, would you consider releasing like short stories? You could be like, like a collection of
I
Zara's.
would, yeah, I would. I actually turned one of them into a short story recently just to see if I could do it. Like the
Yeah.
marriage event, the Revert marriage event one, I turned that into a short story, and that was quite funny. But I think, yeah, I will do that. I think once I'm finished with this book
Mm.
and I've got a bit of time, then I will definitely, yeah, I'd like to explore something
Yeah,
else.
I think that'll
Yeah.
be really fun. Yeah, I can't wait for that. I'll keep an eye out, definitely. So we've talked about what the book, how it's resonated with people and how that's made you feel, but what did you really hope to achieve with it?
I think I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. I wanted a book out there.
Mm,
I wanted my book to be published by a mainstream publisher. Like,
mm,
I didn't want to self-publish or anything like that. I wanted it published and not indie. I wanted it published by a mainstream publisher. I wanted a fully authentic British Bengali experience out there. And
mm.
alhamdulillah, I got that. I wanted most of the feedback to be good. Alhamdulillah, I would say most of it has been really good. Yeah, I think I've ticked pretty much everything, every box I wanted,
Mm.
alhamdulillah. But obviously now I have new ones. Now I'm like, I want another book, and I want another thing, and I want this, and I want to write this. I want to take over the world, you know? So you
Yeah.
start, once you get your dream, you start dreaming bigger, don't you?
Yeah, good. So you should. And so you said that you kind of had the seeds were sowed when you were 19 or whatever yourself. How do you think 19-year-old Tasneem would feel about this book?
I think she'd be surprised at how different things are now from how it was
Mm,
then, because obviously then there were no apps.
yeah.
website, like online thing it was still really new and no one really did it at all. So, and people, I feel like people were more conservative back then as well. So things were a lot stricter. Like you wouldn't just go meet people on your own and all of that. That wouldn't really happen. And then marrying outside your culture, that wasn't an option when I was younger. That was not an option at all. I did it, but I did it at 27. If I tried that at 19, my parents would have said no. So yeah, I think things are very different. But I think 19-year-old me would have just been so happy that I got here in the end, because you know my degree is in creative writing, so I've always known I'm going to do something. I just didn't know when and what and whatever it's going to be, but I always knew I wanted to do something, and I'm just so happy, alhamdulillah, that Allah's blessed me with this.
And a 19-year-old you wouldn't have seen a book, a rom-com about a British Bengali girl on the bookshelves.
You know what? It's timing.
In all leading bookstores.
It's all timing.
She would never have seen it,
Exactly. Like, I don't think the world was ready for Zara when I was 19.
Yeah.
Or me, to be honest. I think they all still find me a bit like, crazy.
Is there anything that if you could do the whole thing again, that you would do differently?
If I did the whole thing again, firstly, I would not write 140,000 words. I would have planned it better, because I didn't plan it, isn't it? I was just really writing chapters in the middle of the night, posting them online, and everyone was like, this is great, and I was just carrying on. So I wouldn't do that. Like now, like the book I'm writing now, it's more structured, because obviously I've realised I've learned from my mistakes. So I wouldn't do that. I would save myself a lot of time that way. What else would I do differently? Maybe the characters. Like, I would have more diversity in the characters, I think. I would want it to show like more of a relationship with the friends. I feel like because the sisters were so big, I felt like her relationship with her sisters took over more than her relationship with her friends. I think I would have liked the friends to have come out a lot more in it. What else would I have done? I think there's little bits and pieces, like even now, like when I read it and I think of something, I think, maybe it would have been better if I had done this, or if I had done that. I would have liked to have shown different sides of Zara outside of looking for a husband. I think that's missing. I feel like, because obviously when you're looking for a husband, it takes over, but that's not all you are. I feel like here I just focused so much on that. I didn't show everyone who else she is apart from that, and I think that's definitely missing. So there's things I've learned from after, and it's amazing how no matter how many times you read it, you always find new things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, even as readers that didn't write it, like whenever I reread a book, I always take something different away from it, and I love being that happens with literature. Never have the same experience twice. Yeah,
that's so true.
So what books and authors inspire you? Who are your go-to authors?
I don't know. I don't have I hate these questions. Your favorite that. I can't answer those questions in my life, because every day you feel something different towards something else. But I think right now my focus is reading books by people of color. I feel like I've spent my whole life reading books by white people and studying it and all of that, and it's not that I'm over it. I feel like now is our time. So I'll still read stuff here and there. I'll read things, here and there. If it interests me, I'll read it. But I'm trying to focus more on reading that. I feel like now's the time to support people of color. I want to spend my money on people of color. For too long we've been hiding away in the shadows, waiting for our time, and our time's here. And I want to do everything I can to help that. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. So I just read, like I follow all of you guys and on Instagram, and then if I see any book and I feel like, that looks good, then and it's by a person of color, even better, I'll buy it and I'll read it and I'll support them.
Yeah, great. And there are so many, I think, now authors of people of color, and so many new authors as well that are releasing debut novels and just getting out there. Like, I think it's such a great time for literature, for diversity in literature. Like, I'm really pleased.
Me too. I'm excited as well to see what's in the future.
Oh, me too. I feel like over the last few years we've had some absolutely fantastic work, and I think it's only going to get better.
I would like to write something that's not a rom-com one day as well.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the book that you're working on at the moment? Is it another rom-com?
Yeah, it is. So because the book deals, it was a 2-book deal, and it was, both of them were for commercial, like women's fiction. The 2 books. So it's
they're not connected.
they're not connected. There's a different character. She's still Bengali. She's still from North London, but different part. And it's still a rom-com as well, but it's a bit different. It's different from Zara, I'd say. And I've also written a YA book. So I wrote that last year. So I've been editing that as well because I would love something to go with that. That's called Hijabi.
Okay.
And yeah, that one is the book I wish I had when I was a teenager, basically.
Oh, that sounds so great.
I'm really excited about that. So there's that, and I've got like an idea kind of floating around in my head for what I want to write after as well. So yeah, there's just, I just want to write so much, and you know, I want to have a cookbook as well because I love cooking and recipes. And
I see the food that you post on Instagram and I'm just like, oh my goodness. One, how does she have the time? And two, it just looks so good.
Oh,
I would like to come around. I would like to come around inviting myself.
You know what? Maybe one day I'll do like a little bookstagram thing in my house. And I'll feed you guys. But I'd love to. Yeah, like I love cooking, but I don't write down any recipes. That's the problem. So my recipe book would be a bit shit. I need to obviously write them down.
You need to start writing them down.
I need to start writing them down because people ask me and I'm like, I feel so bad. I'm like, what do I tell you? Like, I can tell you a bit of this, bit of that. I can't remember what happened next. But that's not really a recipe. So.
Well, I struggle also with quantities because and my husband says this as well. He's like, whenever you make something, it tastes different. Every time you make the same dish, it tastes different because
so
I like put different quantities in based on like how I'm feeling and how it's mixing with the thing, especially like
and how it looks.
Yeah, like especially sometimes when you use tomatoes, they don't always taste the same, and so it affects the recipe, right?
Yeah,
and so
that's true.
Everything is different, but yeah,
that is so true.
I would love to eat your food. I'm gonna come. I'm inviting myself.
I'd love that.
And so my final question is, because you write so much, and I absolutely cannot wait to see what you do next. Do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
I think get a group of fellow writers, find a group, start some kind of writing workshop. I think that really helps, where you kind of share your work with everybody else and then you receive feedback on it. I think that's absolutely invaluable. Like I did an MA in creative writing, and I think the thing I benefited most from the entire MA was the workshopping, and it was having different people, also writers, read over your work and critique it and really help you, you know, come up with things that you would never have thought of, and then you do the same for them. And I think having that accountability and that structure and having different voices read it and give you their opinions is priceless. I think if you're serious about doing that, about writing, I would say definitely find a writers group, get together a group of people and just do it like once a month or whatever. I think that is absolutely invaluable. Yeah,
that's really great advice.
Are you planning to write?
Yeah,
I think you are, aren't you? Oh my God, tell us.
You know what, I would love to. I absolutely would love to. And every time someone asks me this question, I just feel so sad because I have some ideas for things that I would like to write. Like I've got some ideas for a short story collection. I've got an idea for a novel that I've been sat on for literally 2 years. And I don't know. I'm really slack with it. And every time I tell someone, they always get really angry at me and they're just like, Sammy, just do it. Like, what's wrong with you? Just do it. But I will. Hopefully, inshallah. Like I will, because like I write in my day job. Like I'm working communications in the charity sector, so I write all the time. Oh my God,
I worked in communications in the charity sector. Oh my days. But yeah, I know what you mean. When you wite all day, it's like the last thing you want to do at night.
Yeah. So like I used to find writing really helpful, like really therapeutic, and I found that creative writing came really naturally to me. But now I have blocks, I think, to writing because so much of it is work related, especially like, you know, when you work in the charity sector, like so much of what you write is so hard.
Yeah,
it's so tough. You're dealing with such difficult things, or you're doing like really hardcore marketing in the sector as well, which is also tough in a different way. And so yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with being able to write outside of work, but I'm working on it.
Yeah.
And hopefully, inshallah, once I break down that kind of those blocks and barriers I have at the moment, hopefully I'll have some space.
I just know it's going to be amazing. I can't wait.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. But yeah, I'll keep you posted.
Yes, please do. Please do.
And I will find a writers group.
When you come round, maybe we should start our own writers group.
Oh, I would actually love that, because I feel also what you said about the accountability is really true as well, because I'm not writing it because no one's expecting me to update them on it or like read any parts of it. But if I knew that I had friends and like a group of people that that were waiting, maybe I'd be a bit more inclined to just push through.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Inshallah.
Yeah. But thank you so much for today.
Thank you for having me.
Love talking to you.
I've loved it as well. I can't wait to have you on my podcast one day talking about everything you've done.
Oh
Inshallah.
gosh, yes. I'd love that. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much to Tasneem for such a fun and interesting conversation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow The Diverse Bookshelf on your podcast platform of choice and connect with me on social media. I would really appreciate it if you could rate and leave a review, as it helps more people find the podcast.